We can all relate to our physical bodies as our temples, right? Our temples. And I've been going through a little transformation this year. I've never undertaken the challenge that I've taken this year, and it's been really interesting to reflect on it because I've never had a body image, so to say, but I think that there's been a whisper that has been constant throughout my whole life, and I understand that there are people in this room that probably have a screaming voice of underlying body issue. I don't have that, but it's been a whisper in my whole life, and I can remember being in grade 9 and being on the wrestling team, and I was pretty good. I was a wiry, little chunky, short guy, and I did really well. I went to Northern Ontario, placed 3rd there, and I was pretty proud of myself. And the tournament was over, and I had my just jeans on, and I was like trying to find my stuff, and I was like, some guy's like, older guy, he was probably a dad, he's like, can I help you? I was like, oh, just trying to find my shirt. And he's like, I don't think you need a shirt, son, you look pretty good. And I was like, huh. And I could remember back, and I remembered eating coconut cream pie, and I had 2 slices of coconut cream pie, and I vomited all night. And I remember my mom making, it's called cinnamon toast. Has anybody had cinnamon toast? Like toast with sugar and cinnamon. And I think I crushed a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread? It probably, she says. And I remember really liking ice cream. And I remember liking candy. And I remember I would tease my brother. He's younger, so I'd pick on him as a little bit more stronger. And he would always call me fat. And I thought I was a little bit fat. I had a roll, and I would make fun of him because he was skinny, and then he'd say, yeah, when we walk down the street, we're like the number 10. You're the 0. I'm the 1. I just remember all these voices. Like I just remember that undercurrent that I've always had, and I understand that some of you that screams. And it's my weight has always been. Not a challenge, but I felt like I've always been overweight, and or whatever you call it. My wife would call it hunky chunky. That's what she said my body type was. I'm hunky chunky. And then I got at the throes of my addiction, I became 160 pounds. I haven't seen 160 pounds since high school, young high school, about grade 10. And I was always rolled around 205. That was my fighting weight. 205, 200, 195 when I played football, rugby, all that kind of stuff. And that's where I was always pretty comfortable. I didn't have to try to be that weight. That's the weight I was. And then I got into this recovery business at a homeless shelter, and like some of you, I got trapped. I loved it so much. I graduated and then found myself in a rehab center for the next decade. And finally I graduated and I get to do other stuff now. But I was 160 pounds, and I remember coming into that treatment center, and they had it was a homeless shelter, so they had free food. And I remember eating sandwiches. Like I remember going like, why can I eat so many sandwiches? I think I was at 8 one night. I'm like, man, I'm just jamming them in my face, and I'm eating popcorn, and I'm like, I remember it being so full and feeling the food go through my body, and it was just really interesting. As somebody that lost 40 pounds on a Coke bender, and 6-month Coke bender, and then I got into service to others, and that kind of drowned out the noise of hunky chunky or whatever you want to call it. And then I worked at this men's ministry, and we got a lot of the food from the food bank, and it was pasta and breads and SpaghettiOs and boxes of Oreos, and man, we would crush that stuff. Like we would be like, oh, it's dessert time, box of Oreos, and we'd all eat a row. It's just, is it undisciplined? I'm not really sure. But I gained 100. I went up to 120 pounds. I was like, ooh, I'm in the heavyweight category. I'm not that tough to be in the heavyweight category. And then over the course of time, and the older I got up to this January 143 pounds. I mean 243. See, I'm always minimizing. And you guys are all sitting there calling me a liar. I have dyslexia too. So 243 pounds, and I just remember God's been challenging the physical temple in my life, and for 2 years I was like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna work out, and so I do it. I work out like everybody in January the 1st, and it doesn't last, and it just didn't work, and so this is the 3rd year. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna put a better plan together, and I'm like, I sound like John the crackhead. I'm just gonna do. And it's like, it didn't work for the last 2 years. What do you think? Why is it going to work this year? And I just implemented the power of God in my life over food. And I went on this food thing, and it's a cure. I don't want to implement a diet for the rest of my life, but I lost 55 pounds. And yeah. And now it's the hard part of like learning how to live in parameters in the physical temple, because the physical temple is connected to the spiritual temple. And so it's been part of my journey of really understanding this holistic temple that we get to be here on earth, because God resides inside of each one of us. And so I worked on the spiritual temple and the emotional temple, and now I'm working on the physical temple, but they're all connected. And that's the narrative that you're invited into. On this earth, we are born into outside the temple, outside of the Garden of Eden. The first temple that was ever recorded was the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. You might have heard that story. And it was a temple, a garden, and it had boundaries, it had walls, it had protection, it had the love of God in their hand in hand. They got to nurture and create this garden and name all the. It was a beautiful living environment, but the enemy came in there too, just like your garden. Because the enemy does have access in your mind. The beautiful thing is we can be hand in hand with God's Spirit inside of the temple. And there is a process that we get to go on, and you could do it through the 12 steps. You could do it through a myriad of ways, LifeLab, and it's about clearing the temple, because God's love has to come in consent with your work. And so I want to clear out the temple, and that's the experience that we get to have, is clear out the temple. God, take the good and the bad, because I can't tell the difference, because inside of here is a mess, and only He can clean it up, but I have to come into acknowledgement with it. And so that's introducing the power and the experience of God on the inside. And so that is a narrative that we can all relate to. I'm the physical temple. Man, that's just part of it. But we have a spiritual temple inside of you. And we have access to a power that can separate us from cocaine and heroin and food and fill in the blank. Horrible relationships, spending, trying to climb a corporate ladder or try to get the most likes and comments and all the friends on the social media and comparison and all that stuff. And I understand that there's an enemy that's whispering in your head, and he might be yelling. But he always whispered in my head, and it was about this food stuff and that I'm hunky chunky and all that stuff. And only God can remove that. And so freedom is peace on the inside. Whatever the storm is, we can handle it because it's about the inside of the temple, and it's about me in a relationship with God, and whatever's going to happen out there, I can be okay inside.